This video is a crash course on getting Grafana set up with Docker. So by default, Grafana runs on port 3000 and is based on the Alpine Linux distribution. So this is Grafana right over here on port 3000, which we spun up with this command, docker run mapping port 3000 on our machine to 3000 in the container. And then the image is Grafana, so it's owned by Grafana, and then Grafana again. And if we navigate into this image, which is called g-c, run a bash shell, and we list out the version, we can see Alpine listed right here. And now, by default, like most Docker containers, Grafana container logs are emitted to standard out. So to demonstrate this, let me stop and remove the container, and let's spin it up again, but this time not in detached mode. And we can see all the logs coming to the terminal like this. We can change this with the environment variable gflogmode. And now if we set it to file, for example, and we run this again, note how no logs are outputted to standard output. Instead, Grafana will place logs inside the location -var log Grafana and grafana.log. We can also change the log level with the gf log level environment variable. So if we run this, now we will only get worn and above logs, and we also set the log mode to console, so it'll be in the console again. So you can notice that a lot of the configuration for Grafana comes from environment variables. These environment variables can also be used to configure authentication. So right here we can see we have our welcome to Grafana, and by default the username and password is just admin and admin. So if we run this twice, we're logged in, and now we'll have to enter a new password, or we can just skip it. But after we've done that, we're logged in. We can also change the authentication with environment variables, specifically gf security admin user and gf security admin password. Now, if we run this, our username will be Witceptor, which is my Chrome extension, link in the description, and our password will be the best Chrome extension. So now if we run this, and let's refresh this right here, we're back in the login page. We have to type in Witceptor, the best Chrome extension, it was best Chrome extension, and we're logged in. Notice also how we're not asked to change the password. Now let's talk about Grafana provisioning. So by default, Grafana stores its provision configuration inside the directory -etc-grafana-provisioning. Provisioning is essentially when you push configurations into a Grafana instance with configuration files. For example, if I open up another terminal here, and let's run a command against our Grafana container to list out the contents of this directory, we can see access control, dashboards, data sources, things like that. So it's all the stuff we use with Grafana. If we want to add a data source, we would just add a YAML file to -etc-grafana-provisioning -datasources. And then we would just add our datasource.yaml file. So let's actually do this. And I'm going to do this with a Docker file, which is this Docker file right here. So the data source we're going to create is Prometheus, and we're going to copy a datasource.yaml file into this location. And I also need to create this file. So we have our data source be Prometheus with the URL at these environment variables that we specified in here. But now that we copy this file into this location, we should have this data source connected. So first let's build this image. I'm just going to call it p-i. And now let's just create a container from this image by using docker run. And now let's refresh here. We'll probably have to log in again with just the default of admin. Let's skip this. And now if we go to search for data sources, we can see we've connected to Prometheus. So we have connected to Prometheus. We can also see our environment variable replacement worked, and we can just test this connection. But of course I don't have this actually up and running, so the connection will fail. But we can see how we have our data source created, and all because we placed our data source file in this provisioning data sources directory. And finally, let's talk about data persistence. In other words, persisting Grafana data across different containers. And of course, this is done with Docker volumes. So to demonstrate, first let's create a volume. I'm going to call it my Grafana volume. Let's remove our old container. And now let's spin up a new container with this volume. So port 3000, GC again. And now we provide our volume, but it's called my Grafana volume. And the important location is -var-lib-grafana. This location will allow us to persist data. So let's run this. Now let's go back into Grafana. We'll have to log in again. And now inside our data sources, let's just add some random ones like this. We don't actually, of course, have to connect or anything. This is just to show that the data was persisted. So now I've added 4 data sources. Of course, if we refresh, they're still there. But now let's shut down our container. And now let's spin up another one, or another container, but let's call this GC2 with the same volume applied. And if we spin this up, go back here and refresh the page, we can see we're still logged in, and we also have all our data sources. And now one last thing I want to show you is getting rid of that login page. So maybe there are times when where you're consistently spinning up Grafana and you don't want to have to get that login page all the time. Well, what you can do is once again use an environment variable, and this one is gf auth anonymous enabled. Just set that to true, and I'm going to change the container name to gc3. And actually, let me remove that volume, and if we run this, need to remove that container. But let's run this, and now reopen the page. We're back to login page, or back to the main page, but we didn't have to actually log in. But that's all I wanted to show you, just a quick crash course on Grafana. If you like stuff like this, check out my courses linked in the description. Also my Chrome extension called WittScepter. It's really useful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Besides that, thanks for liking and subscribing. Take it easy.